Yo, what's good, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another reaction video. We got the 8 most underrated NFL players. Let's check this out.
The NFL is full of a bunch of underrated players.
Facts.
So in today's video, I want to talk about the 8 most underrated players currently playing in the NFL.
Okay.
So as I said, we're
Just
going to be
BK
talking
better
about
be
the 8
on
most
this list.
underrated players in the NFL. Obviously, the opposite of underrated is going to be overrated. So if you guys do want to see a list of the 8 most overrated players in the NFL, let me know in the comment section below, and that will probably be my next video. And if I miss any names on this list, make sure to tell me in the comment section as well. But let's go ahead and hop into the list. Starting off at number 8, we're going to be talking about Logan Wilson, the
hell no, bro. This nigga is probably the most dirtiest player in the NFL right now. I'm not trying to hear shit about Logan Wilson. Fuck him.
Cincinnati Bengals. Now,
Fuck
the
this
linebacker
nigga.
position in general has sort of become an underrated and underutilized position within
Nah,
the league.
also
Many
another
teams
underrated
prioritize
person for
the
me is Quincy
secondary
Williams,
and
for
sometimes
sure.
the defensive line, but not many teams prioritize having dominant linebackers. But one of those teams that has somewhat made it a necessity for their defense has been the Cincinnati Bengals. Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt are two of the better linebackers in the league, and I do think they do see that position as somewhat of a priority. And fortunately for the Cincinnati Bengals, Logan Wilson has become one of the best linebackers in the league. The past several years, he has combined for over 100 tackles. He has over 50 assisted tackles last year. He has 5.5 sacks on his career, 11 interceptions, and multiple forced fumbles every single year. And that's basically the calling card of Logan Wilson. He is a turnover machine. Not many linebackers in today's league are optimistic and playmaking styled linebackers. Typically, we call cornerbacks those type of guys, like a Trevon Diggs or a Deron Bland. Those are guys who we typically see as being playmakers and guys who can switch a game in just one play. But for the Cincinnati Bengals, they don't really have that guy in the secondary, so they rely on a guy like Logan Wilson to help force a couple turnovers.
Also, like another guy for the Bengals, I think it's very underrated, is Mike Hilton, bro.
The reason why
one of the better slot corners in the
league is,
for sure.
By most of the research that I was able to do on Logan Wilson, I saw that about most of the rankings had him below the top 15 to top 20 linebackers in the NFL. And I think with his level of productivity and his ability to change a game in one single play, I do think that he is easily a top 15 linebacker. I don't think Logan Wilson is particularly special in run defense or pass defense, but I think the ability to make plays and the ability to be good enough at those things makes him a top 15 linebacker. Next up at number 7, we're going to be talking about Derrick Brown. Derrick Brown has been in the league for quite some
100%.
time.
He deserved every bit of that money he got paid in offseason, bro.
And while he hasn't necessarily been this fantastic player every single year, last year he really broke out to be one of, if not the best players on this Carolina Panthers team.
Had an interception, had a
Carolina, there was
tackle.
not a lot of really positive things that happened last year. Obviously, the team was god-awful, the defense wasn't that great, and the offense was the worst in the league. But a bright spot for this team moving forward is going to be Derrick Brown. Last year, he combined for over 103 total tackles, had 2 sacks, and even had an interception last year. But the calling card for Derrick Brown is going to be his ability to stuff the run. Oftentimes, defensive tackles and defensive linemen in general are classified by how many sacks they get in a single year. And while I do view sacks as a very important stat for a defensive tackle like Derrick Brown, whose main objective is to stuff the run, only having 2 sacks is not disappointing at all. This is a guy who makes plays very often, not necessarily big splashy plays like the sacks or the forced fumbles or stuff like that, but makes plays in different areas. He's fantastic at holding up in his block, handling double teams, stuffing the run, all those sort of hard-nosed tackle stuff that you need to do as a defensive tackle. Derrick Brown does it at a very high level. Do I think Derrick Brown is the next Aaron Donald? Obviously not. Aaron Donald was a sack machine who could do everything.
Because Derrick Brown, he might not be a future Hall of Famer, but bro, this nigga can play ball for sure, bro.
Derrick Brown is not quite that, but I do easily think he's a top 10 defensive tackle, especially when it comes down to being a stellar run stuffer. But next up at number 6, we're going to be talking about Christian Kirk of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, Christian Kirk started off his career with the Arizona Cardinals.
I mean, can you really say he's underrated, bro? I mean, he's like, he hasn't had a consistent stretch of 1,000-yard receiving seasons, bro. I mean, the closest was 2021 to 2022. He hasn't really been that consistent, like over 1,000 yards. And now, he hasn't had a horrible career, but it's just not where you can call him underrated
a
for
pretty
real.
consistent player throughout his entire tenure in the NFL. He didn't really break out until 2021 when he had a total of 982 passing yards, and then in 2022
But I think
when he
Christian
broke
Kirk
out
is pretty
again
decent,
with
though.
1,108 passing yards. And unfortunately last year, dealing with a bunch of injuries, prior to the injuries he had 787 yards on 57 receptions and 3 touchdowns. And while I don't think that Christian Kirk is a bona fide receiver 1 in the NFL, I do see many people continuing to undervalue what Christian Kirk brings to the table. Christian Kirk is your do-it-all guy who can make plays underneath, who can also make plays over the top. He's a big playmaker and oftentimes will take the big over-the-top throws for touchdowns. This is a guy who ideally you don't want as your receiver 1, but ideally you can have him as your wide receiver 2, and last year they did try to do that with Calvin Ridley, but unfortunately Ridley just did not turn out to be anything better than what they thought they had. But now you put him next to Brian Thomas, the rookie from LSU, and I do think he's going to be fantastic for this team, and now you're able
Trevor
to
Lawrence
relieve
got
Christian Kirk
drilled.
of those wide receiver 1 duties and
Pause,
put him
no
back
diddy.
to where he should be at that wide receiver 2 spot. I do think as a wide receiver 2 he is extremely undervalued. He might be the best or second best receiver 2 in the league. Obviously there's other guys out there
We know he's not the best. Come on now. T. Higgins for sure is the best number 2
like
in the
T.
league.
Higgins, maybe Tank Dell's in that conversation, or
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs, whoever you want to put there. And there's a bunch of other guys you could throw in there as well, but Christian Kirk is just as good as those guys I just listed. Kirk may not blow you away with his stats, especially when you think that he's a receiver 1, but as a wide receiver 2, he could easily average 900 to right now in the NFL as somebody who's outside of the top 30 best receivers in the league, but I do think Christian Kirk is easily a top 30, if not top 20 wide receiver in the NFL, especially when he's healthy. Next up at number 5, we're going to be talking about Frank Ragnow of the Detroit Lions. Now, oftentimes offensive linemen go under the radar for many, many years of their career. And Frank Ragnow has been one of those guys who has just gone under the radar and sort of under the arms of guys like Jason Kelce. But now that Kelce is retired, I would make the argument that Frank Ragnow is the best center in the league. Obviously, there are some other guys out there like Creed Humphrey and Tyler Linderbaum who are fantastic younger players.
Yes,
but Frank Ragnow has been doing this thing for quite some time, and he is the head of the table when it comes down to that awesome Detroit Lions defense. Frank Ragnow is somebody who could do a bit of everything. He's excellent in run blocking, he's excellent in pass blocking, he's just a reliable and durable center that you can trust to make big plays throughout your entire tenure of him on your team. Again, he's an offensive lineman, and at that, he's a center, which is one of the more under-talked about positions in the league. But when it comes down to it, I don't really know if there's a more important position on the offensive line outside of the center, maybe besides like the left tackle. And Frank Ragnow being who he is a fantastic center, and I think he's going to be a fantastic center this upcoming season. Now, usually when I see rankings for Frank, I don't really ever see him being talked about as the best center in the league. There have been a couple that would give him that nod, but I would say that he needs to be in the top 3 of every single list, and I did see a couple where he was outside of it.
I'm pretty sure he would be top 3 now that Jason Kelce's not in the league anymore.
Cardinals. I must be very open and transparent here.
You said James Conner?
I thought that James Conner was the most overrated running back in the league, but after his past couple years with the Arizona Cardinals,
and he's especially reliable, and I'm saying the pass game. He's got one of the best hands at running back, bro.
1,040 yards, which puts him at an average of about 5 yards a carry and 7 touchdowns. And being the fact that he is 29 years of age, which puts him as one of the
had that nigga Minka in a spin cycle.
That he is 29 years of age, which puts him as one of the older starting running backs in the league. He is only getting better with age. Again, he's 29 years old, and in his last and most recent year, it was his only year with 1,000 rushing yards, and I do expect him to get close to that number yet again this year. And I think more than just the stats for James Conner, the thing I like the most about James Conner is everything else that he brings to the table for this Cardinals team. I love the fact that he is a leader on the football field, a guy who you can rely on, especially when you're paired up to a guy like Kyler Murray, who's not necessarily the most vocal leader. He also does bring quite a bit when it comes down to the receiving game. Last year only had 27 receptions, but has consistently gotten over 30 to 40 receptions throughout his career. And he's also an excellent pass protector as well, so all the intangible stuff that you want with a running back, James Conner has it. And when it comes down to it, when it comes down to just pure running back stuff, if he got 300 carries a season, he would easily average over 1,000 rushing yards a season. James Conner doesn't really get the level of usage that you see other running backs like Derrick Henry and prime Le'Veon Bell. James Conner only consistently gets less than 200 or just at 200 rushing attempts a season. I do expect that to continue to follow through in next year's season, but I would not be surprised if his level of usage does continue to ramp up. Next up at number 3, we're going to be talking about Trey Hendrickson.
For a fact, bro. How the hell is Trey Hendrickson so underrated when he's got back-to-back seasons of like, what, 12 plus sacks?
Bengals now. I know I talked
this nigga is so good. Like, Okay, it wasn't back-to-back seasons, but he had 17 and a half sacks last year. He had 8 in 2022. He had 14 in 2021. 13 and a half in 2022. Like, this nigga is so underrated.
Doesn't really make you a good player or not, but I do want to throw this guy out here.
Over 12 sacks
machine
in 3 of the last 4 seasons for him, bro.
Lineman in the NFL, I don't think that we ever include Trey Hendrickson. Last year via PFF, he accounted for about 20 sacks last year. And
like we only really hear about T.J. Watt, Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett.
He is a sack monster.
You never really hear about the guys like Trey Hendrickson or Daniil Hunter. Or know what I'm saying, Brian Burns. Like those guys are the most underrated edge rushers for me, bro, because they don't get talked about enough. It's only the top 4 that they always talk about with Bosa, Parsons, Watt, and Garrett. So good to see Trey Hendrickson getting some love, even though he is a Cincinnati Bengal and I'm a Ravens fan.
Trey Hendrickson is that he's not
but
a fantastic,
I'm saying he is a dog.
Great run stuffer at the defensive end position. But I don't think a lot of the Bengals' issues with stuffing the run is on Trey Hendrickson. I think a lot of that was because of some injuries to the defensive tackle room. Trey Hendrickson really has one job for this Bengals team, and that's to get pressure on a quarterback and get sacks, and he does that at a very, very top-tier level. I will make the argument that I don't think there's a better pure pass rusher in the league outside of Trey Hendrickson. Yes, you can make the conversation about T.J. Watt and maybe Max Crosby and maybe Micah Parsons.
Crosby as well. I forgot about Crosby.
All those guys, Trey Hendrickson is probably the most consistent of those guys, and he might just be the best pass rusher of those guys. I'm not going to say he is the best one, but I think there's a legitimate conversation to be said about that. Feels like every single game this guy is making consistent plays, whereas a guy like Micah Parsons can kind of go hot and cold. He's a monster on the field. I suggest you guys watch his highlights.
And he has a lot of forced fumbles too.
Next up at number 2, we're going to be talking about Trevor Lawrence, the Jacksonville Jaguars starting quarterback. Now, these stats...
this one's a little iffy for me, bro. You know, I mean, this only really good season was 2022. The only reason I'm not saying 2023 because of the touchdown interception ratio is really throwing me off. And he's not had a passer rating over 100 yet in his career. So can you really say he's underrated, bro? You feel me?
On the field don't really look that impressive for Trevor Lawrence. Like, they don't.
I mean,
bad,
I feel like the talent is still there. He just gotta.
For his career, he has
be more consistent.
11,770 passing yards for 58 touchdowns and 39 interceptions, and that's just within 3 seasons. And I do think last year was a bit of a step down from his sophomore season. Last year, he had 21 touchdowns and 14 interceptions.
They didn't even wait to pay him, bro.
8 interception. And well, initially just
because he had 2 more seasons left of eligibility.
Not that good of a quarterback, but I think when you take the step back, look at all of the advanced stats and actually watch the film, you will see a lot more of the positives of Trevor Lawrence. I advise anybody who thinks that I am wrong in this pick to go out there and just look at any Trevor Lawrence film rooms, and oftentimes you will find that the majority of the bad plays that happen to Trevor Lawrence are typically not his fault. Last year, Calvin Ridley was a big-time disappointment for this team, and the injury to Christian Kirk really hurt this offense last year.
No, I agree with that.
It also doesn't help Trevor Lawrence that Travis Etienne has not really developed into being that top-tier running back that this team thought he could be. I don't really know what to expect.
When you typically lose your number 1 guy, that's when the team usually struggles.
But if Brian Thomas can be really good next year, then Trevor Lawrence is going to have a massive season next year. He's consistently putting the ball in the right place, making the right reads, and throwing pretty damn good balls, but consistently over and over again, a piece of either the offensive line would let him down or a piece in the receiving room would let him down. And that's not to say that everything is going against Trevor Lawrence. He has a pretty solid team around him, but ultimately speaking, I think there's a lot of really good things that does happen with Trevor Lawrence. Now, I'm not here to make the argument that T-Law is a top 10 quarterback in the league. If you want to make that argument, go right ahead. I don't think he's top 10, but I consistently see him getting compared to the likes of Daniel Jones, which I think is absolutely ridiculous and just complete rage bait. Trevor Lawrence is probably a top 15 quarterback, and I think if he has a big year next year, he's easily a top 10 quarterback. Let's not forget he was drafted number 1 in the NFL draft for a reason, and
that's what's making his career so far a big disappointment because he was drafted number 1 overall. One of the most
I expect him to play
high prospects of all time, bro. Outside of Andrew Luck and Caleb Williams,
taken out of the draft. But now let's talk about the number 1 player on my list. And if you've been following this channel for quite some time, you know that I have been in love with this player for quite some time because I think he is a truly special player in the league, and that is going to be Xavier McKinney, the current
Green Bay roll Tide.
Now, Xavier McKinney has been really freaking awesome the past couple years for the New York Giants. He started off his career a little bit rusty and didn't really play all.
I'm glad he's finally on a good team with the Packers.
In some parts of his sophomore season, but he has been a breakout player ever since then. And now he's joining a Green Bay Packers team where he's going to be paired alongside the likes of Jair Alexander.
Hey, why is hello?
And now he's joining a Green Bay Packers.
Why is this side longer than that side, bro? Like, McKinney, come on, bro. You got to cut some of this off, bro.
Team where he's going to be paired alongside the likes of Jair Alexander, and I think that secondary is going to blossom because of it. Xavier McKinney is everything you want in a safety. He's excellent in coverage. He's excellent in making plays and forcing turnovers. He's excellent in run support. Is he the best safety in the league? Maybe. I think there's definitely a conversation to be had. Oftentimes we compare him. I don't think
he's the best safety yet,
Justin
bro.
Simmons isn't even on a team right now. Xavier McKinney is. And
now McKinney, I'll say top 10 for sure.
At that, he's a player who I thought.
Well, you got guys like Kyle Hamilton, Antoine Whitfield, Marcus Williams, Justin Simmons, Derwin James.
Very damn good. Whenever you watch his film and whenever you watch his highlights,
Minka
this is a guy who
Fitzpatrick
consistently makes the right plays at the right time. And for a Packers team that really needs somebody to help them force some turnovers, Xavier McKinney is precisely the guy to get the job done. Again, I think he's an undervalued player, and I think when it comes down to it, he might just be the best safety in the league. He stays healthy, he's very consistent, he forces turnovers, he's good at run support, good in pass coverage. There really is not a major flaw to his game. Again, that's not to say he's a perfect player, and that's not to say he is the best safety in the league, but I definitely do think there's some conversations we need to have about Xavier McKinney. But that is going to conclude my list. If you guys have any more recommendations for players that could have been on this list, again, let me know in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.
Hey man, what do you guys think? Who's the most underrated out of this 8 people on this list? Y'all let me know down in the comments below. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys like, comment, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Turn on post notifications, get notified whenever I drop another banger video. One road to 300 subs. I'm gonna give it for more banger NFL content like this. And without further ado, I'm out. Gang.